Well, hello, Liz. Thanks so much for joining me today for a conversation about book design. I'm so looking forward to what I will learn from you in this call and what others will also learn from you. For those who are watching, this is Liz Kalloch of lizkalloch.com. She is a graphic designer, an illustrator, an art director, and all kinds of artistic genius, and owns her own studio where she works with all kinds of folks on their projects, and looking forward to having her share some of her experience and wisdom with us today. So Liz, thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, I'd love for you to just share with us a little bit of your background of how you came into the work that you're doing today. Would you mind just giving us a little bit of a survey of the landscape of your background?
Sure. It's a little bit of a windy path, as
Okay.
most of us have had, getting wherever we are currently.
Yeah.
I have a fine arts background with a minor in comparative literature, and was never, ever going to be a designer. I was going to be a painter. I was going to read fabulous books.
Sounds
And
lovely.
I know, doesn't it? And I kind of wound my way into it. I've worked in the book industry. I've worked in bookstores. I've worked as as an assistant to several writers. So I had been in that world. And I got a job with a nonprofit running their book catalog, and they were like, well, we heard you have a fine arts background. Are you interested in design? And I was like, oh. And then I met my first Mac. And I met Photoshop, and it was like, oh yeah, I'd like to do this. And so I had a job, and they basically trained me how to use all of the software, and I started designing for them and really loved it, and still sometimes laugh at myself, my 20-something-year-old self, who was like, oh God, it's so crass. I'm just going to be a painter.
It's crass to work in the world of like products and stuff, like you mean?
And it's just so, it's just such a different thing. I don't think that anybody ever told me, design has this other side to it. It's not just packaging. It's not just advertising. It's expanding the story that's already there. And I think that if someone had used that phrase when I was still in art school, I would have thought, oh, okay. But it was just very linear, and talking about, and everybody in the design program was geared towards getting in as an advertising, and it just wasn't something that interested me. As time went by and I was doing the design work, I finally put together, oh, if I'm a designer, I could design books.
The thing that you already love.
Exactly. So that's the kind of longish, windy story about how I ended up as a designer. Yeah.
And I love what you were saying about how realizing that it could expand the story that's already being told, and how that, it sounds like that would really speak to that heart of you that loves literature and loves, kind of being in the deeper waters of life and art, and that you could just come into that in a different channel and kind of join up with it. And so yeah, I can see how that would appeal to you, just given what you've shared of who you are and what you love.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that books have just had a really large impact on my life in general, just in terms of, growing up in a family where most everybody were readers, and my mom really encouraged us to read. And we moved a lot when I was a kid too. So in the time between, you move to a new place and it takes a little bit of time to find those friends. In the meantime, I had my books.
Yes.
And my brothers, but mostly my books.
I love that. Yeah, they were your friends that held your hand as you were making the transition. Yeah. That's great. So you've got this path toward discovering that you could be a designer, and that you could be a designer of books. And kind of sharing what was interesting to you about that. What do you find that you are enjoying most about the experience of being a book designer?
Oh gosh, I think there's a lot of different things. I think that, one of the big things is that what I had just said about taking somebody's work. I always read the manuscript, or as much as of the manuscript as is finished before I even start sketching ideas, and just that crossover, and that there's this entity in and a life in the words that have been written to create the manuscript for the book. And I think the thing that's really intriguing to me and very challenging is then, as a designer, to come in, read this, step into that world, and then try and come up with something that a reader, a bookstore shopper, an Amazon shopper, wherever, someone is looking for books, is going to see a cover or even the spine and want to pick it up and go, oh, this really speaks to me. And so that's that. I mean, for me as a designer, that's the biggest challenge of interpreting the story, the words, the intentions of the author, and creating a cover that's going to hold it and really represent, so that when someone picks it up, because we've all had that experience of picking up a book, falling in love with the cover, kind of reading the back, flipping it open and going, oh, and then you get home and it's like, oh, this isn't anything like I thought it was going to be.
So true.
And so the design challenge is to find that it's like a pinpoint of balance almost between the story and how it's going to be represented visually. And it's really hard. And I love doing it. It's one of those challenged, we all have those, like, I love being challenged by that. I really do.
I think about that in the editing process. I feel like what you're describing is similar for me in the sense that it's a challenge that stretches me and that I love, but it's like every time I'm like, okay, it's almost like a puzzle. Like I have all these pieces of story and it's like, how do these best fit together? And it's like figuring that out is really exciting, but it's always like a little bit like, And go ahead.
Yeah, no, it totally is. And each time I get a new project, and like I'll get the manuscript and I'll be sketching out ideas, and I swear each time I think, am I going to be able to do this?
This time? Yeah. Is it going to work?
Is it going to work?
Yeah, and I know writers feel the same way. I mean, Anne Lamott is famous for talking about that. Every time she sits down, is it going to come again? Like, is it going to work this time? And, she's been writing for like 40 years. So, yeah, so it's interesting how maybe the work that we're called to do will always maybe carry that mixture of like, feeling like you know how to do it, but you don't know how to do it at the same time.
I know.
Yeah.
And I think I don't remember now who said it, but I think whoever you are that said it, maybe many people did. There is that, the importance between I'm in over my head and I'm scared versus this is going to be challenging and I have butterflies and I'm a little nervous. I think the butterflies and I'm a little nervous, it's good, because it says to me that I'm still excited about my work instead of, oh, well, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And I love what you're saying too about your process being that you read the whole book before you get ideas as you're going along. But I have to be honest, I've worked with marketing departments and design departments that they don't read the book at all. I mean, they're writing back cover copy that they've never read the book. They're basing it completely on the book proposal that was like way back before the writer actually finished the manuscript and it was edited, and it always like just made me die a little bit inside to think like people are creating promotional materials and packaging for this beautiful thing that they don't know the heart and soul of it.
I know, and I think it's also just that's kind of just a piece of when you're working for a big publisher and how many books do they put out each season, never mind every year.
That's so true.
And they don't have time. I don't think that they have enough publicists anymore to be sitting and reading.
Yeah.
I like to imagine that maybe like way back in the 1960s, people were actually sitting at their desks reading a whole manuscript. I don't know if that's true or not, but I like to imagine that.
I know. You're kind of like trying to harken back to that maybe with your own approach. Well, Well, and I like too what you were saying about, the reader that's in the bookstore or on Amazon and shopping, and it's like they're looking at the cover and they're looking at the spine, and they're looking at the back cover, and they're looking at the inside of the dust jacket, and they're reading the, little précis about the book. And they're basing their decision on whether they're going to buy it on what they see there. And so they don't have time to actually read the whole book while they're in the bookstore, else they wouldn't even need to buy it. But you really are introducing the reader and the writer to each other, and it's so important what you're doing to kind of facilitate that movement.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think that just like the value of a good editor, I mean, most writers know the value of a good editor because they've worked with an editor regularly or they learn. Mm-hmm. Oh, wow, I really do need someone to help me tighten. And I think, I've never written a book, so I'm only guessing here, but I think that it's a huge endeavor. It's a huge undertaking. Mm-hmm. And you're so in it that to be able to see, to be able to look at, step back and look at the big picture, I would imagine anyway that it's difficult.
Yes.
I mean, I know that it is when I'm working on a big painting, it's really difficult for me to see the whole thing. I'm like looking at this one little piece. And I think just in a very similar way, but for different reasons, working with a designer is just as important. I think that if the designer is attentive to the project, I think that's the right word I want to use. They often will show the writer what their story looks like. Wow. And I hear all the time, not just about mine, but I have friends that are designers that work on books that hear over and over again, I didn't know that was what it was about until I saw the meta, that was what it was about, until I saw your cover image.
That's neat. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love too, I mean, there was something you said when you were first talking. I think you used the word interpret, like interpreting the book. And I was it got me thinking about color and shape. And I mean, you're using different languages to tell the story, in a very quick, the reader's going to just immediately get a sense of it just by what you put together with color and shape and design and all these things. And there's a language that you're providing that's different than the kind of language the writer speaks.
Right. And somehow, so then it's somehow, working together to bring those two languages into one, and have it hold its own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hang together. Well, that's, I just got goosebumps just kind of thinking about all of that and how, really it's the writer, the editor, and the designer that become this really important threesome team, and then obviously there's the printer and, the distributor, right. All the people that it takes to get a book out into the world. But I love the feel of each of those three kind of being like a leg of a stool that, all help the book hang together. And, I know just from conversation we had previously that you have done some book design work for larger publishers, and now you're working on your own independently, your own studio. Can you talk a little bit about the difference that a writer might have working with a big publisher for their book design and working with an independent artist or someone who's running their own book design company?
Sure. I think the big difference is that an independent designer, whether it's me or somebody else, is going to give the author a dedicated amount of attention to their project. And I think publishers are wading through so many changes, just like so many industries in the last 10, 15, even 20 years. I mean, was it 2000 that Time magazine declared that the book was dead?
Oh, right.
And so far it's not, and which I'm really grateful for. But I think that with publishers, like we were talking about a few minutes ago, they're a bit like a machine, and not a bad machine, but they've got, tiers of people that work to get the books in the pipeline and to the printer and out the door so that they can get their catalog out. And
Right.
I think that, and I know authors that have had great experiences with working with a publisher, and others that not so great, and it really varies. I think as an independent designer, I'm working on one book at a time with the author. So I try not to take, so I'm not working on two books at the same time, because I think that would be a little, it would be tough. It would be tough, because I think that the way I work with, reading the manuscript, and when I'm coming up with design ideas for the cover, because that's where I usually start, we're going back and forth a lot. And there's something really rich, and there's something really satisfying about that exchange. And for me, it's the thing that I'm loving about doing book design, is working one-on-one with the author, so that I'm hearing her ideas, I'm hearing, her vision for the book. I'm then reading the manuscript. I'm saying her because I've actually never worked with a guy, but I'm reading her manuscript and coming up with my own ideas, and then we're talking about them. And so there's so much dynamic energy in that exchange, and I think that that time is so important to have just a solitary focus for me, a solitary focus on building the design, imagining, the whole package finished, talking about ideas, what's working, colors. Sometimes the author will have an idea for something that she wants on the cover, and it's like, well, that's good, and we can mock that up, but I have this other idea that I want you to look at. And that whole process is so important to a book being finished and going out into the world. So I think that if you're probably a well-known writer, like you mentioned, Anne Lamott, I'm imagining, I would hope that she gets one-on-one attention with the designer and with the editor for her publisher. But there's so many books out there. There's so many writers, and there's so many stories that are worthy of being told. And I think that it's tough these days to get picked up by a publisher. Most publishers are counting on the author having a big social media following so that they can already guarantee sales of books, because they've lowered their staff. And the world is a-changing, and it's I love that in the process of it changing, for the book industry anyway, that there's still writers who are I was going to say brave, and then I took it back, but I'm going to say brave, and, so behind their story that more and more are self-publishing.
Right. That's what I love too. I mean, it's scary. I know when the sea change started to happen, it was like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to publishers? What's going to happen to bookstores? What's going to happen to writers? And, publishers, like you said, have really boosted their expectation of the writer. And I love what that does is it makes the writer, I run into a lot of writers right now who are saying, well, if I'm going to do all that work, even to get through a traditional publisher, why don't I just do it just for myself and, get the benefits that I gain from going the self-publishing route. And so I just feel like the opportunities for writers has really just grown. Whereas for publishers and bookstores, it's gotten a little scary. No, I would agree with that. And I think that I think it's so much of, how we look at things. And I think just in general as human beings, when things start getting taken away or things change and we're not ready, we have that tendency to go, no, let's just keep it the way it is. But if we can have those moments of like, okay, I'm going to be a big girl and be brave and look at what this world could give me and what I can give to it, it changes things a lot. Yeah, it just expands the possibilities. Yeah.
The internet has changed so much for just about any industry. It's changed so much for most people. And I think most especially the creative arts, writers and artists and musicians, and we're able to get our work out in a much more immediate way. There's no waiting for someone to notice us there, but there is the, responsibility of, okay, I want my story to be noticed, so what do I need to do? What am I willing to do to put this story out into the world?
Yeah, it makes me think of, did you read the book, oh goodness, I think it's called The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer.
Yeah.
And how she talks about being up in the garret as the artist and then needing to still lean over the window out into the marketplace and say I'm creating this thing up here. I hope you'll come see it, and
I know.
And now there's this, you have to, I think in today you need to be a little bit more savvy and intentional about how you spend your time, and which is a bummer for the pure artist who just wants to be up in the garret all day. But, there's rich opportunity if you're willing to really open, like you said, open to what could be.
Yeah. Yeah. And, there definitely has to be the willingness to put yourself out there. And it's, I say that, but it is something that I struggle with myself of how often should I post on Instagram, all of those things. And I don't want to start bothering people. And then, when you think about it, it's we're all going so fast, and I just take a lot of deep breaths every day and go, okay, this is what I want to be doing. This is what I want to, one of the things that's really important to me is working as a designer with one-on-one with an author. So how do I keep putting myself out there? Not to be obnoxious, but to say people, hey, I'm over here and I really love doing this, and maybe we're a fit.
Yeah, it's finding your own way in doing the thing that you love and still connecting with other folks who might want to partner with you. Yeah. So I'm curious, just kind of, I feel like our conversation has gone a lot of different extra little tendrils of ways, and it's been really interesting. As we kind of draw ourselves back around to kind of the closing place, one thing I'm curious to know is, what do you wish an author knew about design and packaging and working with a designer, or any of that? What do you wish that they knew that you run into the most, that if you could just tell people some wisdom, what would you want them to know?
I think first and foremost, one of the things that I want them to know is that it's so hard, I think, to separate yourself from what you make. So as the writer, to separate yourself from the story and realize that the book design, the package that's going to hold their story, is about the story, not about them. So, and it's so hard to separate. And I say this as a painter who is no, that's about me. And it's but people are looking at it in a bookstore or on Amazon or on wherever online they shop. And however much we say we don't judge a book by its cover, we do. And maybe judge is the wrong word, but we decide on a book more often than not based on its cover. And if you still go into a bookstore, which I do because we have a local bookstore and I go in there all the time, they have tables in the front displaying the books with beautiful covers or well-known authors, and there's a reason they do that, because that's how we're drawn in. And I think that there's two things. I think that as human beings, we're drawn in by what we see and by what we hear. And when I say hear, it's we're drawn in by other human voices, like when someone is actually telling you a story. So to write a book and tell a story, the voice isn't there, so the visual has to be.
That's great.
Wow. To draw to draw the reader in, because the cover also is not for the writer. The cover is for the reader. And so years ago, I worked with someone who was, she so wanted this one photo for the cover of her book, and she was just determined, and it didn't represent the story to me. And we went through a whole process of, maybe I'm not the designer, but this is what I'm seeing instead, and I'm going to send you some designs. And we went back and forth, and the book was self-published with the image that I had chosen, and she had let go of it. And she came back to me a year later and said, it was the best thing that you could have done for me. And to say that image is beautiful and meaningful to you, but it's not going to be meaningful to your readers, to your potential readers. And I think that's the biggest one, because the author can't be everywhere telling their story out loud to everyone, because, we are keyed in to voice, it's just, I just think it's an innate human thing. I don't know a whole lot about biology, but, when you hear someone's voice talking and telling a story, we all kind of, listen.
Yeah, it's like,
yeah, exactly.
It's like when you're in line at Disneyland or something and you hear people telling, it's like you can't help but eavesdrop, and you're like, it's so tantalizing.
It's just natural. And, and then the other sense is vision. So, really those two things about, the cover design, the whole presentation is for their potential reader, not for them. And it needs to represent them in terms of their story. And that's just so key, I think. We've got all this, I was just talking about the internet, all this stuff where you can go onto Canva or, a few other sites and design your book cover. And I know people who have decided to go that direction, largely for budget, which I totally get. But if you have the budget, hire a designer that can help you interpret your story in a visual way, and it just creates so much depth and resonance, and if it's done well, just the whole package is lovely.
Yeah, and it can have such a long-term impact. I mean, on the bottom line for the writer, if they're self-publishing, yes, there might be a bigger investment up front, but if it's going to be something that connects more with a reader than what you did yourself on Canva, or there's so many services that let you just kind of pop up whatever you want to put on the cover and they'll print it for you, and one of the questions I also was kind of holding is, what would you say is the value of hiring a designer? And I feel like you've been already speaking to that, so that's why I didn't actually articulate the question, is that, you are bringing so much gifting and training and ability, but you're also bringing in objectivity. And you're also, what I love too about just you as a person that doing the work that you do is it's so apparent how much you love books. You love the written word, but you also, I feel like, have communicated just through what you've shared today, the love that you have for the writer too, that you love working one-on-one so you can give them your full attention, and you love going back and forth with them so that the two of you can really make sure that you're on the right page together and going in the direction that both of you are very pleased with, and that you're willing to even say, I might not be the right designer for you if we're kind of reaching an impasse. And so I see so much in what you've shared today about the value of hiring a designer. And also, I feel like you've communicated really well about what it would be like to work with you particularly. So I'm glad for you in the sense that it's giving people a chance to get a feel for, like, if I'm going to hire someone, who should I hire? Well, here's Liz Kalloch. This is what it would be like to work with her. So. Yeah,
I mean, books are a precious, precious thing. And I think that I don't think the power of them is going anywhere, clearly. Amazon may have branched out into selling beach umbrellas and whatever else it is that they sell. But, I mean, if you look at the number of books they have on that site, I mean, people are writing a lot of books and people are reading a lot of books. I think I just don't think that that's going to change. I don't think that's going to change. And it who knows? I could be totally wrong. It could be with the younger generations of kids that are not supposedly not reading books as much, but I think story is integral to who we are as human beings, and I never grow tired of hearing stories.
I'm right there with you. Well, thanks so much for your time today and for sharing who you are with us, but also just being and doing the work that you do in the world, being who you are as you do it. It's great to know that you're there doing what you do, as I am over here on the other side of the process doing what I do. So,
Yeah.
thanks so much, Liz.
Thanks so much.